They said it like a verdict, like the universe had stamped me with a barcode. Non-returnable, non-refundable. You chose to be a single mom. The first time I heard it, I was balancing a tray of coffees for commuters whose shoes cost more than my rent. The phrase grazed my shoulder like a blade, tossed casually by a man in a suit who didn't even look up from his phone. He said it after I apologized for missing oat milk in his latte, as if the lack of foam was somehow proof that I deserved everything that was breaking me. The second time, it came from a hospital nurse with tired eyes, the kind of woman I used to think would understand. You chose this, she sighed, when I begged to swap my shift so I could make pickup at daycare. The third time, it arrived as a line item on a form, nearly invisible, household head, single by choice, followed by a checkbox that swallowed the week's groceries when I ticked it. By the 10th time, I realized the sentence was a script, and I was trapped in someone else's theater, but I didn't understand how rehearsed it really was until the night the elevator stalled at the end of my janitor shift. I pressed my forehead to the cold metal wall and thought about my daughter, Maya, asleep with her stuffed giraffe pressed into her cheek. I thought about the diner manager who docked my pay because I arrived 3 minutes late after the bus broke down. I thought of the way small-town gossip grips your throat like a second set of hands, whispering that you're not drowning. You're just refusing to learn to breathe underwater. When the doors finally lurched open, I stepped into a corridor and saw a memo someone had dropped near the custodial closet. It was stamped with a logo I'd never seen, Civic Wellness Partnering. I picked it up and felt something tilt inside me. The memo was about narratives for personal responsibility, a training packet for managers and HR heads to reframe requests for flexibility. One phrase was highlighted, starred, circled. You chose to be a single mom. I went home with bleach on my sleeves and a paper that felt like a loaded secret burning through the fabric of my coat. I didn't know it yet, but that choice everyone kept sliding across the counter like a receipt was not an accident. It was policy wrapped in politeness, a slogan disguised as ethics. And the part that would take my breath away wasn't that a city could be organized around making mothers feel small. It was who signed the bottom of the memo, and whose hands were clean because mine were always dirty. I wasn't just tired from 2 jobs. I was running laps inside a maze someone designed, and they were calling it freedom. My name is Riley. I live in Cedar Ridge, Pennsylvania, a place where the streetlights hum like old men, and the river keeps its secrets. The town is carved into 2. On one side, the hospital where I clean floors at night. On the other, the coffee shop where I pour daylight into cups for people who can afford to be tired. Between the 2 is an apartment that knows too many versions of my voice. Panicked, pleading, singing to Maya at 2 a.m., bargaining with myself at 4. I work 40 hours that are written down, and another 20 that live between bus schedules and bills, in the cracks of forms and the margins of denial letters. My daughter is 5. She thinks every mother is a superhero because she hasn't learned yet that capes come with line items and benefits not applicable. If you're new here, you'll notice I tell stories the way I survive mornings, with honesty, with a hand on my chest to remind myself I'm still here. This is not a confession. It's a map. I am drawing it for anyone who has ever counted quarters under fluorescent light and decided hunger will be your dinner guest again. I'm drawing it for the people who have never had to choose between diapers and the bus pass that gets you to the job where you serve people who order almond croissants like edible peace treaties. And I'm drawing it for Maya, whose cheeks smell like sleep, and whose curls knot against my neck when I carry her from the sitter's couch, whispering apologies into the dark like a lullaby. Before I walk you into the mess of it, the late fees, the whispered judgments, the memo that changed everything, pause with me. If this story already feels like it belongs to you, hit subscribe. I make these videos between shifts, in the hour when the coffee shop closes and the hospital fluorescents start their cold dawn. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes the world feels small enough to hold if we name the corners aloud. Maybe you're in Detroit with a sleeping baby on your chest, whispering, "It's going to be okay," into a tiny ear that believes you. Maybe you're in Boise on your lunch break, hiding in your car because the break room has turned into a courtroom. Tell me your city. Tell me your time zone. Tell me if your supermarket clerk ever pretended not to see your card decline and handed you the milk anyway. We are not statistics. We are coordinates. We can find each other if we stop pretending we're lost for fun. My 2 jobs started as a stopgap. I thought the hospital would be temporary, just until the coffee shop manager gave me full-time hours. But full-time comes with benefits, and benefits come with cost. And cost comes with a ledger that balances on someone else's scale. We don't have the budget, the manager said, tapping her keyboard like it could conjure money. "But you're such a team player, Riley. We'll get you more hours soon." Soon is the town anthem. Soon is the word people use to fill the spaces where their promises would be, if they had ever intended to keep them. And so I learned to live in the split. Morning crowd smiles and espresso shots at dawn, mop water and disinfectant at night. The middle part of my life was a bus seat. I kept one backpack for Maya, snacks in little baggies, a thrifted sweater, a book with a giraffe, and one for me, a memo pad, a small screwdriver to pry coins from the bottom of vending machines, tissues for the mornings when the sky looked too heavy, and I had to cry quietly into my sleeve. I pinned a photo of Maya to the inside of the custodial closet, next to the inventory list for trash bags and degreaser, because I wanted all that industrial gray to see what joy looked like. I could handle the hours. What I couldn't swallow was the chorus. "You chose to be a single mom." It fell out of mouths that also said, "Bless your heart," and "We're all struggling," a sentence quick as a door closing. They said it like a joke, an observation, a truism. They said it like a kindness, a reminder, a scolding wrapped in silk. When I explained that Maya's father left after our last ultrasound, the one where her heartbeat looked like an orchestra on the screen, they tilted their heads. "Couldn't you make it work?" Code 4. "Weren't you willing to accept everything to avoid being alone?" "You seem strong," they'd say, which meant, "We will not help. You don't need it. You asked for this." The line lived on tongues, in inboxes, on posters for the Pregnancy Resource Evening, hosted by a church that gave out gift baskets of diapers and pamphlets that smelled like shame. It was in the daycare waitlist's email, priority for two-parent households to support stable social development, a sentence that turned my stomach and signed itself with a smiley face. Then came the memo, and even before I learned what it meant, I felt the word scratching at a truth. I wasn't hearing a town. I was hearing a decision. The memo was 3 pages, printed on glossy paper that my hands smudged. Civic Wellness Partnering, CWP, Quarterly Training, Aligning Workplace Narratives for Resilience. It explained how to respond to employee lifestyle barriers without creating employer liability. It outright recommended reframing scheduling conflicts, childcare emergencies, and transportation issues as personal lifestyle choices. Under examples and scripts, there it was. When an employee cites single parenthood as a scheduling constraint, use this phrase: "We admire your dedication." Remember, this was your choice, and with choices come trade-offs. How can we help you make better choices next time? I stared at the sentence until the edges blurred and the white of the page turned to noise. My brain flickered through a reel of recent conversations. My hospital supervisor's sigh, the coffee shop manager's "let's be realistic," the daycare coordinator's "we can't rearrange the world, Riley." They had paused before saying it, as if they were juggling words and selecting one carefully. Scripts. The memo explained the careful pause, the rehearsal. But who wrote the lines? The footer named 3 sponsors: CWP, the Cedar Ridge Business Association, and something called the River District Renewal Fund. There was a signature block for the training leader. Prepared by H. Ellison, CWP consultant. The name hit me sideways. Ellison. My downstairs neighbor, Helen Ellison, the one who pressed her ear to the ceiling when Maya danced, the one who complained about kid noise to the landlord because she worked from home and needed calm. I had assumed her job was in consulting, because she used that word like it was a passport. I didn't know she wrote the script of my life. When the pieces began to fit, I wished I could scribble them apart, but the puzzle locked. Helen led workshops at the hospital, the coffee shop's parent company, the daycare network, and the city's welfare office. CWP wasn't government, but it wore the government like a coat, an approved vendor, stamped by the city council, paid to conduct resilience trainings across the River District. The training's goal was to reduce absenteeism, normalize accountability, and reinforce narratives of choice. Narratives of choice. The word tasted like bile. That week, everything sharpened. The hospital's time clock froze on my break, and the supervisor logged my return as late. The coffee shop dumped a crate of milk near the sink, and the manager asked me to stay an extra 2 hours, just this once, then sent a group text. "Riley's got it tonight. Teamwork." When I said I couldn't, Maya had a winter recital, her first. The text bubble paused. Then the manager called. "I admire your dedication," she said softly. "Remember, this was your choice. With choices come trade-offs." I glanced down at the memo in my bag, then at the photo of Maya taped inside my phone case. "I'm making my trade-off," I said. "I'm choosing my daughter's recital." The shift was posted. A coworker I barely knew sent a DM. "Bless you, but just a heads up, they keep tabs on who says no." That night, the elevator stalled again. It felt less like a mechanical issue than a message. I sat on the floor and remembered something my mother told me when I was 11 and she was teaching me to ride the city bus. People will pretend the route is the route because the sign says so. But someone made the route. Someone decided who waits the longest. I clutched the memo until my knuckles burned. The next morning, Maya's class sang, "This Little Light of Mine." She wore the yellow sweater I'd repaired with mismatched thread, each mend like a breadcrumb trail of small survivals. After the song, they handed out paper stars. On hers, the teacher had written, "Maya, brave and kind." The words made my chest feel both too full and like it might collapse. We stopped at the corner store for milk. At the register, my card declined, then approved, then declined again. Some glitch that felt like a joke. The man behind me sighed loudly. "People need to stop having kids they can't afford," he said, to no one and everyone. His eyes cut into me. "You make your bed. You lie in it," the cashier finished, not looking up. I left with milk and a lump in my throat the size of a fist. I wanted to run. Instead, I decided to listen. I started taking notes. Every time someone told me I had chosen this, I wrote down the details. Time, place, who, what exactly they said, the cadence of the pause before the phrase. A pattern emerged. HR meetings, nurse stations, the daycare lobby, the food pantry line. The same adjectives: dedicated, resilient, strong, inspiring. The same follow-up question: how can you make better choices next time? Better choices like a toddler puzzle in a box where one piece is missing, and the picture on the front is a family of 4 with a Labrador. That's when Mrs. Patel from 3B knocked on my door. She's 60, always wears turquoise, and smells like cumin and rain. She watches Maya when I'm on the late shift, and she's the only person who doesn't say, "I don't know how you do it," like a compliment. She says it like a warning. You shouldn't have to. That night, she handed me a plastic container of dal and sat at my small table as if she were sitting at an altar. "You've heard it too?" she said in a voice like a cymbal muffled by a palm. "Heard what?" "That line." She nodded toward the memo on my fridge. I'd taped it there under Maya's drawings, half wanting to forget, half needing it to keep me honest. My niece is a nurse. Same training at her hospital in Pittsburgh. Same words, same laminated cards. Something in me broke open like a window in a stale room. "It's a script," I said, and it felt like confession and war. "They're teaching them to say it." Mrs. Patel tilted her head the way she does when she is deciding whether to be gentle or true. "And if it is a script," she said, "who wrote the play?" We started tracing. Phone calls. Google searches at the public library because my phone plan was on its last mercy. The River District Renewal Fund, it turned out, was chaired by Councilman Warren Leon. Smiling banner ads. Talk of revitalizing our downtown by adding wine bars to streets where the only full grocery store had closed in August. He sat on the board of the business association that hired CWP. The CWP consultant in our building, my neighbor, was part of a regional network that sold narrative alignment packages. Their clients, employers, nonprofits, yes, even the daycare network. They promised cost savings by reducing elasticity in scheduling and deterring overuse of hardship allowances. I read those phrases in the library and wanted to throw up in the potted plant by the printers. Then I saw a familiar name in a case study on CWP's website. Pilot Program. Blue Harbor Roasters. That was the parent company of my coffee shop. The case study was a celebration of culture change. It included a testimonial. Employees now self-regulate, understanding that life choices are market choices. Our managers feel empowered to hold the line. Life choices are market choices. The words glowed like neon poison. The next day, the daycare posted a new policy, a $20 late pickup fee for every minute after closing. I called the desk, hands shaking. "Buses are late," I said. "You know that. How can I avoid?" The woman on the phone exhaled, then softened her voice into a script silk tone. "We admire your dedication, Ms. Hart. Remember, this was your choice. Will you say it again?" I said, too quietly, the way you ask a ghost to repeat itself so you know you're not losing your mind. "This was your choice," she repeated, but there was a tremor there, like maybe she had a niece, too. I wish I could tell you I found a lawyer with a spotless desk and a cheap retainer, or a journalist who said, "This is a scandal," and ran the headline. But Cedar Ridge is a place where the law wears the same cologne as the councilman, and the paper has a real estate section, but no investigative reporter. So instead, I did the only thing I could do with a secret, too hot for my coat pocket. I turned it into a microphone. The city was hosting a community wellness forum at the high school auditorium. CWP was presenting their successes. There would be muffins, the investor class's idea of being approachable. I wrote my name on the public comment list and felt the room pinch around me. Helen Ellison sat on stage, hair neat, slides cued, each bullet point a little knife. Councilman Leon beamed from the front row, his smile a billboard that refused to dim. The hospital HR director was there, the daycare network coordinator, the coffee shop district manager with a clipboard that looked like a shield. The room buzzed with philanthropy and caffeine. Helen clicked to a slide titled, "Owning Our Choices." The screen filled with phrases, personal responsibility, resilience, trade-offs, and there, at the bottom, as if it were inevitable, "You chose to be a single mom." The words were so big I felt like they might roll off the screen and crush us in our folding chairs. When they called my name for comments, my knees trembled. I thought about being small. I thought about Maya's paper star. I thought about the nights I napped in a bus shelter because the bus stopped running and the hospital needed me, and the coffee shop would frown at anyone who arrived with shadows under her eyes. This is the part of the story where a normal voice becomes something else, where the human throat grows teeth. I stepped to the microphone and slid a folded paper from my pocket, the memo, and held it up like a mirror. "Hi," I said. "I clean your hospital floors. I serve your coffee. My name is Riley. I'm a single mom. I work 2 jobs. I am tired and proud and more angry than your muffins can sweeten." A laugh rippled through the room, then died when I didn't smile. "I've been told that I chose this," I continued. "At the hospital, at the coffee shop, by the daycare, by the welfare office. I've been told with a smile and a sigh and a line in a policy manual. I thought it was a town chorus, but it's a script." I lifted the memo. "It's your script." Murmurs rose like wind. Councilman Leon shifted. Helen crossed her legs and gave me the kind of smile you reserve for children and protesters. "We admire your dedication," she began softly, like a lullaby that swallows the listener. "But they trained you to say it," I said, voice shaking but sharp. The pause before the phrase is in the training, the cadence, the words. "I found your packet in a hospital hallway, and I've heard the same sentence from 4 different agencies in the same week. You turned an entire city into a call and response, and the response is this: we admire your dedication. This was your choice." I looked out across the auditorium. There were moms with their chins tilted up at the ceiling lights to keep tears from falling. There were fathers whose mouths flattened into lines you could measure with rulers. There were teens with hoodies half raised, eyes glinting like matches. We were all so tired of being told exhaustion was a lifestyle. Helen leaned forward. "Ms. Hart," she said, voice now the exact measured tone of her slides. "Our trainings simply encourage productive conversations. We cannot and do not control what anyone says. We provide tools." "Tools," I repeated. "Hammers and nails to build cages." Councilman Leon stood, a gesture meant to be calming. "Riley. May I call you Riley?" He didn't wait. "We have to balance compassion with sustainability. Our businesses—" "Your businesses," I cut in, "saved money by making help feel like failure. They saved money by saying the same sentence until it sounded like common sense. Life choices are market choices. I read that on your own website." The district manager flinched. "That was aspirational language." "Aspirational?" My laugh cracked. "Aspirational is my daughter asking for a birthday cake, and me learning how to make frosting from powdered sugar and prayers. Aspirational is standing at a bus stop at 4 a.m. and telling yourself the sky is just a curtain, and you can pull it back if you get a good enough grip." A woman at the back raised her hand, trembling. Can I say something?" Without waiting for permission, she stood. "I'm Norma. I work at the daycare. We were trained to say that line. We were told it would strengthen the culture. Every time I said it, I felt like I was putting a brick on a woman's chest. I'm sorry." She started to cry. "I'm so sorry." Another hand. "I'm Danny," a nurse said. "They rolled out the scripts in April. We were told to keep notes on repeat offenders. We have to underline the phrase." The auditorium shifted, like a table leg finally falling into its socket. Voices overlapped. A father shouted, "My wife was told the same thing at the benefits office." A teenager said, "My mom at the pharmacy." Mrs. Patel, turquoise scarf bright as a flag, stood and said in a voice that filled the room, "You want resilience? Watch a mother turn hunger into a game her child can win." Helen lifted her hands like a conductor trying to hush an orchestra. "Let's not let anecdotes overshadow data." "This is data," I said, thumping the memo. "This is your R-squared of cruelty." Someone laughed, then clapped, then the clapping became a beat, then the beat became a chant. "Not our choice. Not our choice." It moved like weather through the rows. The sound expanded until it felt like a physical thing, like fog or fire. For a second, I thought I had done it, blown a hole in the wall of the maze. That's when the lights cut out. The auditorium plunged into darkness. A collective inhale, a whisper of fear. Then a small light, phone flashlight, flickered. Another, and another. Tiny suns in a dark sky. Someone shouted, "Power glitch!" Someone else said, "They pulled it." I don't know which is true. I only know that the sight of so many tiny lights made the darkness look ridiculous. I raised my own phone and held the memo under its beam. "You can dim the room," I said, "but you can't shrink us back down." A security guard appeared near the stage, then hesitated when the district manager shook her head. For a moment, everyone was still, suspended between rehearsal and revolt. I didn't plan the next part. I only knew that sudden silence is a kind of violence, and I'm done being stabbed by quiet. I began to read. The entire memo. Every bullet point. Every italicized "remember." Every supportive phrasing. I read the names. I read the sponsors. I read the sentence that had lived in my ear like a parasite, until I fed it back into the room where it was born. When I finished, the lights blinked back to life. Councilman Leon stepped toward the mic, face carefully composed. "Thank you for your passion," he said. "We'll take this under advisement." "Under advisement," Mrs. Patel muttered. "File it under garbage." I thought the meeting would dissolve into nothing, the way so many things do here, like river foam. But then Norma from the daycare stepped up and placed her staff badge on the stage floor. "I won't say that line again," she said. "You can fire me, or you can find another way." Danny the nurse did the same. A teacher, a pharmacy tech, a barista from the rival coffee shop. The stage floor became a mosaic of tiny plastic rectangles and the courage of tired people. Revolution in Cedar Ridge did not come overnight. The muffins got eaten. The memo did not evaporate in a puff of shame. CWP issued a statement, so smooth it could have been oiled. Our language was never intended to harm. The council convened a task force, the civic version of a nap. The coffee shop cut my hours for a week, then reinstated them after customers. Mothers and old men and teenagers who had watched the live stream left comments that bit like winter. The hospital posted a "We Hear You" infographic with pastel icons and no changes to the scheduling system. Helen moved her car to a different spot and took the stairs. She stopped smiling in the hallway, but something else shifted. In the bus shelter, I heard a woman tell another, "You didn't choose to drown," and the second woman laughed like she'd just found air. At daycare, the front desk kept the late fee rule on the sheet, but slid it across the counter with a wink, and the coordinator whispered, "We're reworking it." The memo did not vanish, but its magic did. Words lose power when they're pulled into the light. Scripts sound ridiculous when the audience keeps the program and marks every time the actor reads instead of speaks. Then came the twist I didn't expect. A journalist did call, not from our local paper, but from a regional outlet that had been following Councilman Leon's real estate deals. The reporter had a folder thick with deeds and grant applications, and this is where my stomach dropped, an email thread between the Business Association and CWP. The subject line, "Narrative Alignment Rollout, Focus, Deterrence." The phrase that stomped my chest. Reduce city costs by discouraging dependency. The bullet points. Normalize personal responsibility language. Associate scheduling flexibility with employee choice. Aim to reroute caregiving burdens away from institutions. In the CC line, the chair of the River District Renewal Fund, and a state-level liaison. The reporter asked me for a quote. All I could think was how the sentence that had camped in my ear had been soldered into policy not to guide compassion or foster grit, but to shift weight off budgets and onto backs that already carried more than grocery bags. I wish I could tell you they all resigned. Some did. Leon announced he was stepping back from the fund to focus on his family, a phrase that soured in my mouth. CWP updated their scripts into conversation starters, but I watched the new lines and learned them like an opponent's play. We honor your journey. Let's brainstorm better rhythms. Softer, subtler, still a calculus that assumes a mother's life is a math problem solved by eliminating the need that makes it messy. Here is what did change. We stopped apologizing for needing help. We drafted our own scripts. In the hospital break room, someone posted a flyer. Emergency swap line. Text this number if kid fever strikes. We'll cover. In the coffee shop, a jar appeared near the register. Bus buffer. $, for late buses. No explanations required. The daycare started a rideshare board for parents on the closing shift. The welfare office scheduled a listening session where the words, "We admire your dedication," were replaced with, "We believe you." It wasn't utopia. It was the beginning of an unlearning. I still work 2 jobs. The rent is still the rent. The price of strawberries still makes me whisper apologies to the produce aisle. But the nights feel different. Sometimes, when Maya falls asleep with her hand in my hair, like she's tucking me in, I think about the memo and the elevator and the auditorium lights going out. I used to believe that the worst thing a city could do to you was ignore you. Now I know it can be worse. It can build a choir that sings your struggle back at you as if it's your favorite song. The antidote to that isn't a louder solo. It's a different choir. If you're listening and you've been told it was your choice, your single motherhood, your hunger, your late bus, your eviction notice, hear me. You did choose some things. You chose to stay when leaving would have broken you differently. You chose to love a child who needs you like oxygen. You chose to keep going when going felt like falling. Those are not market choices. They are holy ones. The rest? The schedules, the scripts, the budgets disguised as morals. Those were other people's choices wearing your name tag. If this story found you at the right time, subscribe. I make these between shifts and between doubts. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your city, your corner store, your bus stop. If you need a script for tomorrow, borrow mine. Tape it inside your backpack. Whisper it in the space between the daycare lobby and the time clock. It goes like this. I didn't choose this maze. I choose my light. When someone tells you that you chose to be a single mom, you can answer with the truth that shakes rooms. I chose to be my child's mother. That's not a lifestyle. That's a life. And if you can, if you have $5 spare or 10 spare minutes, put them into somebody else's bus buffer or swap line or casserole rotation. Make your own memo. Sign it with your name and the names of all the people who held you up when the elevator stalled. I used to count change and promises. Now I count lights. Last night, walking home after the late shift, I looked up and saw apartment windows glowing like quiet testimonies. I imagined an aerial map of every phone lifted in that auditorium, each tiny beam saying, "Not our choice, not our cage, not our script. We are rewriting this. We are the authors now." Subscribe if you want to keep reading as we write. Comment where you're listening from, and if you've ever heard the sentence that tried to shrink you. And if you're the one who once said it, if you wore the smile and the script and the soft voice, come with us anyway. We're not trying to cancel you. We're inviting you to throw away your lines and learn a new song. Because in Cedar Ridge, the river still keeps its secrets. But we don't. Not anymore. We put them on stages, under lights, into hands. We turn them into maps. We follow those maps out of the maze, carrying our kids and our fury and our hope. We are not resilient because you made us suffer. We are resilient because we refuse to let your suffering define the size of our lives.